I have for you today possibly the dumbest segment in Newsmax history. Newsmax is one of these sort of like a lower rent Fox News, more extreme, by the way, if you can imagine. And this was an interview that two Newsmax hosts did with Dick Morris. I have to tell you, Dick Morris is kind of a sad character at this point. Dick's in his mid-70s now. He's not super present publicly. But Dick Morris was like a big Clinton friend in the early 90s who eventually had a falling out with the Clintons, turned against the Clintons, but also became kind of a right-wing apologist. I won't necessarily say he is a right-winger, although after watching this interview, it sounds like he is, but certainly a right-wing apologist. I interviewed Dick Morris a few years ago. He hated my line of questioning so much that he hung up on me. You can find that interview on my YouTube channel. So Dick Morris appears on Newsmax right after the Colorado shooting. Now, first of all, this segment existing at all, aside from what Dick says, which we will look at, the segment existing is part of the silliness. Newsmax and Fox and others, they've been covering the Colorado shooting where we found out the shooter is Muslim, totally differently than the Georgia shooting where the shooter is white and the victims were minorities. But for this segment, I'm putting aside the structural hypocrisy and we're going to focus just on what is said during the interview. So let's jump right in and look at the first clip.
Murderers and their willingness to continually make excuses for them. Your thoughts?
Well, there's an overwhelming point here, which is that the killer was a Syrian refugee, and Donald Trump banned refugees from terror-sponsoring countries like Syria. And Joe Biden has opened the floodgates again, letting them in. And in fact, with specifically earmarking refugees, he's increased the number of refugees that can come into the U.S. by a factor of 7 or 8.
So Dick Morris's argument is that the shooter in Colorado is exactly the type of person that Donald Trump banned from the United States, but Joe Biden is now welcoming to the United States. The Colorado shooter was 3 years old when he came to the United States. He was radicalized in the United States, or he became, if we want to go the mental illness route, he developed his condition in the United States and is essentially an American. I mean, I came to the U.S. when I was 5, so I was 2 years older than the Colorado shooter. My upbringing has been shaped here. My education is mostly in the United States. My political views, my interests, my social circle, it's all been shaped here. The Colorado shooter was even younger than I was when he came to the United States. What on earth does this have to do with Syria or Donald Trump's ban or Joe Biden? And if you can believe it, it gets even dumber. Let's continue.
The other point I want to make is if the Democrats are so worried about gun violence, the most important thing you can do about gun violence is to institute the stop and frisk policy that New York City had until the Democrats forced it to be stopped.
Okay, so now Dick Morris says, let's use stop and frisk. We're talking about mass shootings here. Individual gun homicides, handgun stuff. Okay, like you can talk about stop and frisk. Of course, the problem with stop and frisk, as we saw in New York, is its application was extremely racially biased. But this segment is about the causes of a mass shooting that took place with a rifle. Does Dick think that police will stop mass shootings with rifles with stop and frisk, where police just stumble across a random guy with a gigantic rifle in his pants on his way to a mass shooting? It's ridiculous. And then it gets even more ridiculous.
Where the cop actually sees somebody on the street with a gun in a high crime area very late at night and can stop them and see if they're armed. If they're not, they let them go. If they are, they get arrested for a mandatory 3-year sentence for carrying a loaded firearm in the city of New York.
Now, did you hear what Dick said there? Stop and frisk is where police can stop someone if they see them walking around with a gun. That's not stop and frisk. That's you see someone with a gun and you inquire as to the legal status of the gun. But then Dick says they frisk them, and if they have a gun, they get arrested. But Dick, you just said stop and frisk is police see someone with a gun and they stop them. But now you're saying stop and frisk is if they have a gun after you frisk them, you arrest them. It's making no sense. And of course, its application to mass shootings is zero. Let's look at a little more of this. And this is funny because the host actually says the Colorado shooter was only 3 when he moved to the U.S. It doesn't slow Dick Morris down even for a moment.
Yeah. Ahmad al-Alissa, he moved here to this country when he was just 3 years old. But because of some recent activity of his, he was actually on the spectrum of the FBI. So this is another case that the FBI was aware of him, or at least people near him and watching him, but yet this was still allowed to happen. That's another conversation a lot of folks aren't having.
Yes, well, I think the point is that he comes from a country that sponsors terrorism, Syria. His parents did and brought him here at a young age, but that is precisely the kind of immigrant that Joe Biden is letting in and Donald Trump wanted to bar.
So Dick Morris hears the kid was 3 when he came to the U.S. and the FBI was aware of him, but he's sticking with this is why we don't let Syrians into the country. So the real story there is that yet again, the FBI has their eye on someone, and that individual still can get guns more easily than you can register to vote in some states, with a waiting period on voter registration, right? There are states where you can't register and vote on the same day. You have to register in advance and later vote. But you can decide same day to go get a gun and walk out of the store with it that day, on the FBI's radar, and still was able to do that. But Dick Morris says the problem is, I guess we don't have stop and frisk, and the kid came from Syria when he was 3, and that relates to Joe Biden in some way. I have to tell you, Dick Morris has become sort of a sad figure in politics, and Newsmax allowing him to also expose his incompetence only makes it sadder, but making no sense whatsoever. And the Newsmax host standing aside and letting him do it. We'll have more on this, and I would love your reaction. You can follow us on Instagram at David Pakman Show, and we'll have an additional clip of this interview. It's really something to see. Find us on Instagram at David Pakman Show. Find me on Instagram at david.pakman. If you've been watching the show, you've probably heard me talk about how much I love my Helix mattress. Well, I was really excited to hear that Helix has launched a new company called Allform, which makes premium, customizable sofas and chairs with the same level of quality and comfort that I expect from these guys. And Allform is one of our sponsors today. They're giving you 20% off at allform.com/Pakman. They actually sent me a couch, which I put in my living room at home. It's now my favorite piece of furniture in the house. It took me just minutes to set it up. It's solidly built. It's huge. It's roomy. It has a modern minimalist design, which I love, but it's also very comfortable. Fabric is soft, clearly very high quality. It has become the focal point of my living room. Their prices are very reasonable. And when you get a new sofa or chair, you get 100 days to decide if you want to keep it. And the best part is everything comes with a lifetime warranty. Stop buying poorly made furniture. Go to customize your own Allform sofa or chair right now and get 20% off your entire order when you get there by going to allform.com/Pakman. I've also put the link right underneath this video.